peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
Today in Africa, we see a lot of uprisings, planning for uprisings, plotting for uprisings in several African countries. The events on the African continent, therefore, as predicted much earlier myself, in 2017, I said, before 2020, 13 African countries would have undergone either soft regime change, soft coups, or violent regime change through uprising, which now seem to be real. The signs that and symbols that we see are the real symbols and the signs that more is to come against African governments. What do we do then? There is a new method of changing governments strategically placed in the United States of America by George Soros. George Soros funds civil societies, civil disobedience, civil violence in Africa. It is upon you Africans and African heads of state, wherever you were, as you convene, as you plan to convene next month or before the end of this month in Addis Ababa, to understand the magnitude of this regime change strategy. Many wars are taking place, internal strife, conflicts like the one in Cameroon, Amazonia, like the one in Biafra, Boko Haram, and then in Biafra, like the one in Libya. But the theme is the same. Regime change, uprising. Is it a matter of taking over our resources? You see, the war in Congo has erupted again. Unknown militias have arrived in Congo, restarted the war, and it is going on. All these culminate to one thing. Are we ready to be independent? As I said last week, this week, are people in Africa ready to accept the results of elections? Elections everywhere in Africa are bringing the chaos we see. The people of Africa seem to be divided after elections or before elections. Is Africa ready for elections? Do we need elections in Africa? If so, are we tolerant enough to accept the results? Are we ready? Which method can we use in Africa to make sure that there is hope for the countries and there is hope and the future of Africa is guaranteed? Viewers, the High Court in Malawi today or yesterday was hearing a case when the president had already been sworn in. If the president of Malawi has been sworn in, then the High Court is hearing the case. Is that not a disaster, an accident in waiting? Whether this will make us have a peaceful Africa remains to be seen. And may God help us to build a better Africa. Thank you very much.
So thank you for making the time. I don't know how many people here in the room know or visited Africa, the continent, but I think it will be interesting to use this half an hour to really not only promote what the continent and what your respective countries have to offer, but also to explain why all these investors who are at the Future Investment Initiative should look at Africa.
What China has seen in Africa is opportunity. And they have matched that opportunity with an eagerness and a willingness on the part of new progressive governments on the African continent who are desirous for investment, job creation, growth in their economies, redeveloping broken down infrastructure. China saw an opportunity. It matched. Russia, they have decided also they want a piece of that action. Here we are in the age of the airplane and fast-moving ships, and yet the trade between Saudi Arabia and the Gulf in general is not even a quarter of the trade that existed between Saudi Arabia, the Gulf, and the East African region 200 years ago, when the only vessel available was the Dow. So what does this mean? It means that we are natural partners. It means that our trade existed well before even the colonial era period. These are the trade links that we need to reestablish, to realize that we are natural partners, to realize that the opportunities that exist for mutual prosperity in between our two regions are tremendous. We're telling the world, come, Africa is open for business. Africa's enemies are only those who see us in negative light.
Absolutely.
Africa wants to be a friend to all.
Absolutely.
And is open for business.
Absolutely.
A very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for joining us. A few minutes past 3 p.m. here in Kenya. The show is Kenya Today, where we get to look at the developing stories and the news making headlines and the latest in the local scene here. So thank you so much for finding time to be with me. And so we have a lot that is happening. And remember, in the morning during Good Morning Africa show, I think I delved so much into the handshake. 2 years yesterday marked 2 years after that famous or infamous, depending on which political side you are lined with, that rocked this country 2 years ago. That seems to have changed the political trajectory or dynamics in this country. The handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and our opposition chief, Mr. Right Honorable Raila Odinga. So we looked so much into it, and we're just trying to look at even what really necessitated that handshake and how it was received. Others still have not been very receptive of that handshake. Others who opposed the handshake from the start got to accept and try to understand what it's all about, and they've moved on from that. And since then, we've seen a lot of, heaped political activities and heightened political activities in this country, and that seems to have set this country back to the campaign trail. And now all you hear is 2022 elections, and that is something that we shall look at after this show. We shall have another show because when you look at the politicians today and the political rallies and the heightened political temperatures in the country, you will actually be mistaken. If you're just visiting Kenya for the first time or just traveling into Kenya, you'd imagine that the country is set to go into another general election in 2 months, in a month's time, or thereabout, or sooner, but the country is set to go to an election in 2022. But that handshake that happened in 2018 at the steps of Njogoo House, March 9th, really brought the elections, the campaigns very closer than Kenyans would really want to deal with at this very moment in time. But that is a conversation that Doctor will be having later on from 4 here after this show. So right now, as the show, suggests, we're going to look at the current affairs, what is happening as we speak right now, the developing stories and other stories that I did not get. Today we didn't even get a chance to look at the news-making headlines, at the Kenyan newspapers this morning. I know a lot of these stories might have been passed with time, but a lot of them are developing stories. So we shall look at them and look at some of those stories. We may not be able to look at everything, but others still have some level of urgency and civic significance. Remember, one of the key news characteristics, it has to be timely. So a lot of them are still timely and are still relevant. So we shall take a look at them. I keep watching. And as you keep watching, Abraham, I see you there. Mia Coach, I see you watching there. Yes, I know you want to hear about South Sudan, and perhaps I'll talk about it later towards the end. I don't know if your leaders have agreed on the positions there, because they were fighting about it. But what is apparent now is the insecurity and the infighting among the different communities there in South Sudan. But that is a conversation for another time. So right now, what is happening as we are speaking now is that the BBI, in regards to the BBI, and Muturi proposes scrapping of a popular presidential vote, roots for party-based politics. So Muturi is the National Assembly Speaker, and also so the BBI right now is still the steering committee is receiving opinions. Last time it went out and it came back, and this is what we were able to get from the first time that the BBI crisscrossed the country and got the views from Kenyans across all walks of life. But it appears it was not able to capture everything. And in the morning, as I was here during the morning show, I said there is something very important that I still don't see, or I don't see that it has been captured very well in the BBI, and that is the Kenya's electoral process that has been the source of the pain that a lot of Kenyans go through every 5 years in this country, that has been the source of displacement, that has been the source of heightened ethnic activities, that has been a source of all evil. Let me tell you, all bad things that happen every 5 years outside of corruption. Our political process, our electoral process is not the best. It has proved that it's not serving this country very well. And I was just been hoping that throughout these hearings, this opinion that the BBI team is receiving, even this new opinion that the BBI is receiving, I was just hoping that somebody will come out and point out the obvious. The electoral system in Kenya is not working. It has refused to work the way the colonialists left it with us, the democracy in which we adopted, and now we've been trying to work and find a working. It has refused. It is not serving us well. The way it was anchored, the winner takes it all. It takes us to hell nearly all the time. So can we find, therefore, another route in in which we can still have our democracy. We can still allow our democracy to grow and to thrive, but still our electoral process can be the one not to divide us apart. It will just be just another something in the calendar that allows us to elect our new leaders and just move on with our lives than what it is right now, which is a matter of life and death. So I still want to see somebody come there with concrete suggestion on our electoral process, because these are the matters. These are not very difficult to deal with. Negative ethnicity, just put impunitive laws there. And these leaders who come out on these rallies or come out in these public forums and have these careless talks, let the Constitution deal with them. Period. Let the law catch up with them. Any leader that is inciting Kenyans against other Kenyans, any leader that stands there and displays ignorance in the levels that is very dangerous towards other communities, the law should be able to deal with them. But there's one thing that we need understood. That is one thing that we need solved. And unless this is really, really solved and it's looked at, then this whole BBI process, I think, will be very futile. That is our electoral process in this country. It is the problem. It is the core. We will go east, we will go west, we will circumvent, we will go all around. We're just beating around the bush. All these matters are very good. And all those 9 points that the BBI is anchored is very all right. And I see even our electoral process is there. But can we now go deeper than just the surface that we are looking at and see, okay, do we create a prime ministership post? Do we have 2 deputies for the premier? Do we have an executive president? That is not it. Forget the posts that come with it. If you have proper electoral process, it will not even matter who is the president of this country. As long as a Kenyan from northeastern part of the country, as long as Kenyans from the southern part, the eastern part, every part of the country feels that the government, the person at the top, regardless of who they are actually having my issues are being addressed. The county governments are able to address what I want them to address, and my needs are being met and my voice is being heard. Unless we change that process, unless we really change that process, it will not matter. Have you seen how the UK, they can change a prime minister today? It doesn't even matter. They're always willing to resign. They're always willing, it's not even a big deal. Because there are proper structures and systems in place where people have faith in, where people know that as long as that is working, the justice system is working, the electoral process is working. We don't have to worry about malpractice. We don't have to worry about stealing of ballots. We don't have to worry about the process being compromised. We don't have to worry about having, leaders there who are not even supposed to be there, who were not elected, but because the system can be manipulated. So now we are left with mediocre or whatever it is that we're not supposed to be having, because the systems there are waterproof. So that is my issue even here as this team see what are the solutions, what this is really made of. And he says he recommended the introduction of a performance-based criteria to limit political parties, a proposal he said will entrench political party discipline. Oh, let me just read that again. Do you know how many political parties we have in this country? But I thought we have many until I saw what Nigeria had last year for their presidential elections. I think Nigeria had how many? Was it 72 or 78 presidential candidates? Like you guys, you just broke all the records in the world. About thereabout, a number of presidential candidates that actually fronted their names for the presidential elections last year. So in Kenya here, we also have a long list, not as long as Nigerians, but we do have also a long list. So what the Speaker of the National Assembly proposed there to the BBI team, that happened today, is that he recommended the introduction of a performance-based criteria to limit political parties, a proposal he said will entrench political party discipline. I don't know. Maybe is that why politics in a country like the UK or the US or other developed countries, the politics there, I'm not saying it's clean, but it's very straightforward. Like if you're a conservative, you're a conservative. If you're from Labour, you automatically know what the ideologies of your party, what your party stands for, what you represent, and all that. So it's not difficult for you to choose. If you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, you're a conservative. The other one are liberals, and you know what your party stands for. So if you identify with your party because it is based on ideologies. Well, in the US right now, it's very difficult, especially with the Donald there as the president. president, I think he's just messed up the whole ideology of the Republican Party. But they saved his neck the other day in Senate. So perhaps that is how Republicans feel. Being represented there by Mr. Donald Trump, but. We've seen in Kenya here, parties just coming up every other day. So it's very difficult to even keep track. It's very difficult to even keep track of what they stand for. What are they about? Who are the founders? What is the founding principles? What are the foundations? How do they even intend to change the Kenyan lives? What do they represent? It's very difficult because every 5 years, a lot of parties mushroom all the time. And so I don't know, by him saying that the introduction of a performance-based criteria to limit political parties, I don't know what this performance-based. I don't know under what performance they'll be basing this on. I don't know what will be the criteria. I'm wondering. So I hope that he has a clear. Because some of these suggestions are made, but they don't really give a structure and a manner in which these things can actually be followed through, and a normal Kenyan can actually follow and say, you know what, perhaps this makes a lot of sense. Because if he comes here and he says an introduction of performance-based criteria to limit political parties, who will be responsible for this? Is it the parties, what do you call it? There's a body mandated to check political parties in this country. And sometimes it's very interesting how they act over there. I don't know, sometimes they seems to just be operating in their own laws. And so these criteria and these new laws are proposally said will entrench political party discipline. Here in Kenya, political parties to have a discipline. I'd like to see how that will work out, and I'd like to see how our politicians will receive that, because politicians always, especially from these countries, they've proved the interest comes first. So as long as it doesn't favor them, unless this proposal will go to a referendum, if the whole thing goes to a referendum, these proposals on the BBI, then perhaps Kenyans will have a say. But if left to Parliament, we know as long as it infringes on something they feel is not in their favor, it will never see the light of day. That is our politicians. That is how selfish our politicians are in this country. I don't know how they act outside there in your country, but back here, these people can be very, very, very selfish as long as it is serving their interests. I'm glad, should this thing go through, then the Kenyans will have to decide. But what is not very clear is this performance. What is the performance? What is it based upon? Because they're saying the performance-based criteria. What will the parties do to meet this criteria, to meet the certain threshold? Performing under what? What will this performance be based on? When you look at the checklist, what will be the checklist? Okay, this party has done this, has achieved this, has maintained. What is it? So I think that also Mr. Muturi, Speaker Justice Muturi, perhaps needed to expound more about, so that it's not very ambiguous as it is this way. It's very ambiguous, so you really don't know from which side you're casting that net. And so he also recommended the remodeling of representation at the National Assembly to achieve fair representation and address concerns of disappropriationate constituencies are concerned, particularly in densely populated constituencies. So what he's saying is we need to add more constituencies. I don't know if Kenyans would agree with that. He also, remodeling of representation at the national to achieve a fair representation, because they're feeling there are other, constituencies that are more populated, and perhaps Kenyans are not getting represented properly. And if you ask any Kenyan out there, they will tell you already we are overly represented. Please, thank you very much. But as it appears here, the Speaker of the National Assembly feels perhaps there's a need to create more constituencies so that Kenyans can be well represented. I don't know. Kenyans, do you want more members of Parliament? From where I sit, I think we even have more members of Parliament. Perhaps we need to merge other constituencies and then just perhaps create more that requires to be created. But the wage bill right now as we speak is just on the roof, and Kenyans really are breaking their backs, funding these people's lifestyles, paying these members of Parliament, paying these leaders. And we adopted a very expensive constitution. We have the governors for the 47 counties, we have the deputy governors for the 47 counties, we have the Senate whose role is oversight, and Senate has been slipping big time there at the Senate. Sometimes you wonder, what are they even doing? Except for one time they got to impeach, the Kiambu governor, Mr. Waititu. For once we thought, okay, fine, we have a Senate that works. and for once they were able to carry out their duties. But it has been very difficult to really assess Senate in terms of their role, which is oversight. They have been sleeping over there, and so and also we have the 47 women representatives from every county, which adds to the number of members of parliament that are elected and others that are nominated. So we have a huge, representation there in parliament. So Mr. Justin Muturi, Speaker of the National Assembly, I don't know which are these constituencies that have not, the representation is not fair. Perhaps you could point out, and you could point out and be precise and say such a constituency, such and such a place, so that it's not ambiguous, so that you don't open up a can of worms. And now these members of parliament from all over the place will come in here and feel, you know what, perhaps I need more constituency in my area. Perhaps this county needs more representation. We don't want that situation. So because you are the Speaker of the National Assembly, and perhaps these are some of the concerns that you have to deal with from the members of the parliament that you get to interact with and talk with and see how they carry out their duties there, and perhaps they complain about it. I don't know, but maybe these are just some of the recommendations that they give you to. Yes, I'm sure they gave you this so that you can come here and speak in behalf of the House. Maybe these are perhaps some of their suggestions. But could you perhaps would have been more particular and tell us, okay, which constituencies, how big is the size of that, how many people reside there, and why is it that it should be divided, or part of it should be merged, or what is happening? You should have been very straight to the point, and just by giving examples tell Kenyans where is it, or the BBI team, and which areas that you think that are not fairly represented in this country. But as far as I'm concerned, the wage bill is this long, and our budget is this small, and the wage and we are overrepresented, and a repeat of responsibilities. You find that one house is doing what the other house is already doing, and one side of it's just too much. I don't know. Perhaps they need to sort out that chaos. And if Kenyans out there believe we are overrepresented, so perhaps Speaker Justin Muturi, you need to give examples which constituencies, which areas in this country perhaps do not have a fair representation. So then it is not very ambiguous, because as it is, we are paying too much. If you ask any Kenyan out there, they'll tell you, you know what, no, that's already too much, so please. And the other one is Muturi's proposals coming at a time of heightened succession politics could signal a major fallout of the 2022 elections, with a section of politicians having listed the election of the president directly by individual voters as a irreducible minimum in the constitutional review debate. That is very self-explanatory there. So this proposal that Muturi made, he's proposing that we scrap away a popular presidential vote, routes for party-based, based poll. I think this sounds more like what is happening in South Africa, and I think I was talking about it here earlier in the morning. See, our Speaker Justin Muturi. See, now I think you're coming to the point, all right? Because as I was speaking here earlier, and I think I spent so much time speaking and trying to make that point, and perhaps trying to convince some Kenyans out there, or just anybody out there who was listening early in the morning, all this BBI has done is very well. But I felt there's just one matter they have not been able to address very, very well, that even prompted this process of the BBI report, and that is the elections in this country. Our electoral process is not serving us. Our electoral process has failed this country. Our electoral process, the winner takes it all, usually left this country, the other side of the country, feeling as though they're not part of, they're not included. They're not, because they've lost, so that's it, all right? And the way our politics has been for a long time, it has always felt like that. So there are places in this country where they've always felt like they're not even part of the country called Kenya. A person traveling from a section of this country, they'll tell you, I'm coming from such a country and I'm going to Kenya. And they're coming from a part of a country, and they're feeling when they come to Nairobi, that is when actually they come to Kenya, because the services that are in Nairobi, the good infrastructure that is in Nairobi, the good everything, schools and all that is not available for them back there. So they've always felt as if they're not Kenyans enough. Sadly, they felt as if maybe they're even second-class citizens in their own country. That is not nice. But again, that is what the Constitution, the drafters of the Constitutions wanted to solve when they created, a county government where we have 47 counties, so that services and service delivery goes very closer to the people. But as we have seen, devolution has really has failed Kenyans. And this is why a lot of the governors that we have elected, a lot of the leaders that Kenyans have elected in the counties, when you see the budget of all the counties, majority, a huge chunk of the money goes to paying wages, goes to entertainment, goes, to other miscellaneous things that have nothing to do with the developmental agenda in their areas. So until today, Kenyans still don't understand. And why did I even vote for that constitution? Why did I vote to have that new constitution? Because service delivery still remains the same. When you see the major roads that have been done, it has been done by the national governments. When you see any major infrastructure, it has been done by the national government. Our governors down there, who are supposed to ensure the schools are built, the wells are built in those areas that are so dry in this country, irrigation has been encouraged in the areas that perhaps are a bit dry, but they have some water sources that they could tap into and encourage irrigation farming or things like that. So these county governments have actually failed Kenyans, period, because it is the responsibilities of the county governments to work and liaise with the national government to see this is the problem, these are the challenges, these are the urgent needs of my people where I come from in this number of constituencies now. This is how much this national government can do, but can we have help in this area and this area and this area? So the county governments in this country has failed. So if you ask Kenyans what the wonders of this, devolved government, they're like, you know what, we're not even feeling, what this devolution was supposed to do to us. We don't see the fruits. We don't see how it has changed our lives, because these people, instead, they've become demigods. These governors, they become small gods, and they want to run these counties as if they're running their own personal enterprises. Have you seen all the corruption, all the scandals that are coming from these counties? It is the governor and the wife, and I don't know the wife to who, and their relatives, and it's just bad. So instead, what we managed to devolve very well is corruption. We've seen very important sectors almost getting crippled, like the health, which I still believe should go back to the national government, please, Mr. President. If anybody is out there, keep giving the proposals about this BBI, please. Can you propose that this health docket should go back to the national government? Because if it continues being left to this to the county governments, it's going to be messed up. As Kenyans are going to lose out big time. The same way education has been left to the national government, I think that health should go back to the national government. So anybody out there are still hoping to give their proposal to this team, please do that, because I think Kenyans have been affected, and we've seen it. So we've seen the Mr. Muturi giving his proposals there, and so what he basically proposes here, he proposes a scrapping away of the presidential vote and rules for party-based politics. And I was just trying to explain that point, and we talked about it here earlier in the morning. That is what happens. What he's saying is proportional representation, like what happens in South Africa, where people vote and then the party with the majority, I think the head of the party, or the leader of the party, who right now in ANC is President Cyril Ramaphosa, is the one who is elected, who is nominated, or who is whatever, as the president of the country, and then he is sworn in as the president of the country. But they don't get to choose president directly like we do here. So it's a different. it's a different ball game. It's a parliamentary system. But you see here in Kenya, what we did, we tried to bring in some parliamentary system, and then we brought in some presidential system, and so now here we are stuck. We cannot. We've mixed both, and it's becoming very difficult for us to deal with what we have, because it's a lot. Our system as it is right now, we cannot have this hybrid. It's just too high tech for us, and it is proving to be headache. We want to have a presidential system, and we still want to have a parliamentary system. So it's very difficult to merge the two. So can we decide which one is working very well? So Justice, Mr. National Assembly Speaker here, Justin Muturi, has come out, and what he's saying in a nutshell, he thinks that Kenya will do better with the system that we see in South Africa, which is proportional representation, and whereby we do away with the presidential votes, and then we have the party-based poll where the party with the majority, the leader of that party, becomes the president of the Republic of Kenya. I don't know. This will be all new. Kenyans are still trying to get used to. I think since 2010, we are 10 years in this constitution. I think when it comes to August, because that is when it was promulgated, it will be 10 years in. But we're still sitting here talking about the new constitution. So Kenyans are still trying to adopt this new constitution 10 years later. So I don't know how they'll be very receptive of these new proposals. Should they find their way into the BBI report, that will be a subject. The final report, that will be a subject to a referendum. But what is clear, and what Kenyans by now I'm sure are clear about, for those who perhaps have a better understanding, is that our electoral system is not working for us, period. The way our elections are anchored, the way we go about our elections, the way it's just not working for us, period. And so since it has not been working, madness is keep doing the same thing and then expecting a different result. It is not working. It is not working. Now we need a manner, a way that perhaps a different way of working out the same thing, but finding different results. And perhaps, who knows, this parliamentary system or this popular vote might be the solution to our perennial madness here that comes during electioneering periods in the country. So that is just one of the proposals that was fronted forward by the Kenya's National Assembly Speaker, Mr. Justin Muturi, today. He forwarded it to the BBI steering committee that is chaired by Garissa County Senator Mr. Yusuf Haji. And then number two, the Senate claims exclusive mandate to vet CJ. Remember, Senate today also submitted its own proposals to the BBI. You know, this Senate of ours. Let me just read through some of the things that they proposed today to the BBI team. The Senate has proposed the splitting of roles on the vetting and approval of state nominees by President in submissions before the Building Bridges Initiative Steering Committee. And so in its proposed draft Constitution of Kenya amendment, a bill jointly presented by Majority Leader Kipchumba Murkomen and his minority counterpart James Orengo. Oh, so they worked together for the first time. That's very good. But when they work together, I wonder if it's really good news, So the Senate recommended an exclusive mandate to vet nominees for the positions of Director of Public Prosecutions, chairpersons and members of constitutional commissions, Chief Justice and Deputy Chief Justice. I think this was done by Parliament. By the legislators. These are nominations that were usually done by Parliament. So now our Senate wants to have a role in nominating and vetting, the vetting process. I think the nomination, the names will be forwarded, and then Parliament will help in vetting the nominees, and then it will be forwarded to the President for appointments. So now, that was done by the members of Parliament, but now Senate wants to come in and have a role in, the vetting of some of these public officers, including the DPP, the chairpersons and the members of the constitutional commissions, Chief Justice and Deputy Chief Justice. I don't know if our members of Parliament will agree with that. I don't know what reasons they gave as to why they think they should be holding these nominations. And other office holders, the Senate proposed an exclusive approval mandate on the Auditor General, Inspector General of the National Police Service, and Controller of Budget. All of these, I think, usually went through vetting by the National Assembly. And I don't know how the members of Parliament are feeling about this. And also the vetting of cabinet secretaries, attorney general, secretary to the cabinet, principal secretaries, high commissioners, ambassadors, and diplomatic and consular representatives will be done by the National Assembly according to the proposals handed to the 14-member steering team. Oh, okay, so that part was left to the members of parliament, the ambassadors, the high commissioners, the consular representatives, the principal secretaries, and the secretaries to the cabinet, attorney general. All right, so that is left to the members of parliament. So let's just see how they will handle that. And of course, the vetting and approval of state nominees is currently the exclusive mandate of the National Assembly, as I have mentioned there earlier. Also, the Senate sues National Assembly citing exclusion in lawmaking. This is also what is this happened yesterday, and the Senate moved to court on Monday, instituting a suit against the National Assembly for failing to consider its input of the passage of some laws. The Senate wants the National Assembly directed to work in harmony in legislation of laws. James Rengo and Okongo Mugeni told a three-judge bench comprising Julius Nga and Ndongo and Teresia Matheka, the National Assembly has been conducting the lawmaking business while excluding the Senate in instances where the law requires senators to give concurrence. And now one of the laws in contest is the Omnibus Bill, the National Amendment Health Laws, which made changes to all laws touching on health in counties, which was adopted by the National Assembly. Now the law gives Kenya Medical Supplies Authority, KEMSA, exclusive right to supply medicine and medical equipment to all 47 counties. Okay, the judges directed parties to find. I don't know. By the law giving KEMSA, that is the Kenya Medical Supplies Authority, exclusive right to supply. When you hear exclusive rights, you're like, okay. So who is getting the kickback? Is this healthy for competition? Because I think when it's open, when if counties are the ones who are paying for, these drugs themselves, are the ones who are buying for the medication in the county, health facilities, don't they deserve a right to have a say over? Or when you insist that it's only the Kenya Medical Supplies Authority that has the exclusive rights to supply all the 47 counties with the medication. What are you telling us? What happens to other entities? What will happen to the competition? Because now KEMSA, when you have the exclusive right and you have the monopoly, then you know what will happen. They might just charge whatever amount they want to charge. But when you have competition and the government buys from the best deal, I think you get worth of your money. I think that is much healthier. So of course the counties have been have not liked this, and so now we see that the Senate has gone on to challenge, has taken this matter to court and said this was not in tandem with the law, and that they should be allowed a level of say when it comes to certain matters touching on the counties. And so these exclusive rights to supply medicine and medical equipment to hospitals by the Kenya Medical Supplies Authority to all 47 counties perhaps is something that shouldn't be in place. And so the matter, of course, will be mentioned on May 4th to confirm compliance. So the judges directed parties to file their responses to the petition within a period of 14 days. So we're seeing, a power struggle here between the Senate and the members of Parliament. It's not the first time, but I think, some of these issues here that the Senate is raising are a bit, Because when you allow a situation where people are able to compete fairly, where there's a level of competitiveness, then you get value for the money. That is how the market works. But when you hear somebody has the exclusive rights for something, I don't know, there could be some level of exploitation, I don't know, of collusion with these county bosses. I'm just thinking who's getting that kickback, who negotiated for this. I'm a Kenyan and I live here, and we know how these things work sometimes. Who is benefiting from this exclusive right thing, or what is really happening there? Is it for the best interest of the counties? Has the government really looked at this and decided, you know what, this perhaps could be the right thing for Kenyans? And so, the Senate has gone out there and has challenged this matter. So let's just see how the court will deal with it. So as we speak right now, remember this is Kenyan Today, so I'm just bringing you the latest news that is making headlines across this country today as we speak, and developing stories from the morning to now. And judiciary is at ease, even as Parliament has stepped in to ease the judiciary's money woes following its revision of budget allocations in the draft budget policy statement 2020. Now the National Treasury has allocated 13.65 billion to the judiciary for the 2020-2021 financial year, which the National Assembly raised by 4.35 billion. The Chief Justice, David Maraga, must be a very happy person right now, because remember, every time in the public function, they're always complaining about the money that, they don't have enough funding. The judiciary has always come out and complained lack of enough funding. So this must be some very good news for Chief Justice David Maraga and his team there in the judiciary. So the increase will be a relief, of course, for Chief Justice David Maraga, who has decried Treasury's poor funding of the courts. Now, some key accounts, however, had their budgets slashed, including the Consolidated Fund Services. And, the MPs also cut allocation to counties from 317.5 billion to 316.5 billion in what is likely to intensify emotions between the devolved units and Parliament. Of course, as I said, this is something that the county bosses will not take, lying very lightly. So let's just see how that will play out. And I tell you, that will play out not very well. During the official release of the State of the Judiciary and Administrative Justice Report 2018-2019, President Uhuru Kenyatta deferred with Justice Maraga over funding, but now we see that Parliament has allocated. And I think we've been seeing not perhaps very good working relations from the executive and the judiciary here, and we've seen what seems to be at loggerheads. And even the last meeting that they had, the judiciary was launching another report. This report here, Justice Report, and the President was present, and we saw the Chief Justice coming out and decrying the poor funding of the courts. That was his main issue. But we saw they adopted a more reconciliatory tone, because every time they could come out and they didn't seem to be in tandem, in good working relation. I think that really worried Kenyans, because you want, these are very important organs in the Kenyan constitution, or for Kenyans, very important institutions. So we want a judiciary that is independent, but we also want a judiciary that is comfortable, working with the day's government. And we want a government that allows the judiciary to be independent, but also they have a healthy working relationship, you understand? So when things seem not to have been working, going on very well between the executive and the judiciary, I think Kenyans began to be very uncomfortable. Others would think the judiciary is being targeted. The others would think the judiciary is just is not doing its job. And remember, the judiciary for a long time has been considered to be the weakest link when it comes to especially the fight against corruption, and President Uhuru Kenyatta has not minced his words while addressing this matter and the role of judiciary and perhaps how it has failed. And during this report, the Judiciary and Administration of Justice report, when President Uhuru Kenyatta, after listening to the cries and the Maraga and the team crying and asking for more money, there's something that President Uhuru Kenyatta brought up, and I think even Kenyans would agree with that. Of everything else, forget, but something has been in the public interest for a very long time, and that is the case of the Akasha brothers, you know, the drug lords. They were known, but in Kenya here, they defeated justice. They colluded with the police, they colluded with especially the corrupt judges. They colluded and they defeated justice for a very long time, and almost everybody knew the Akasha's brothers, their history and the involvement, and there was some level of enough evidence you would think would have made them already been locked up. So these people were extradited to the United States within a year of their case being heard and investigations. They were able to be jailed over there. But in Kenya, they colluded and they defeated justice. So President Uhuru Kenyatta was not very happy in this, and I think also this was an indictment of our Kenyan judiciary. And if anything else, Chief Justice Maraga has never served as a wake-up call on the road, and that goes on. There are judges who do their job. It's not all the judiciary and all the judiciary officials that are like this, but majority and the rot in our Kenyan judiciary was really exposed by this very one example. People who, the evidence is out there, but they always taken to court with some shoddy investigations by the police, and then by some shoddy judges, give them very, lenient, even bail terms, and they're out there in the streets, bringing more drugs in the streets and killing more children and destroying many lives. So they defeated justice, being helped by the people who are supposed to be protecting that justice, who are part of the justice system. And so they went out there and were able to be indicted in a record time. So that was a real indictment on our Kenyan judiciary. And I want to believe that that was a wake-up call to CJ Maraga and his team, and how really sometimes the judiciary in this country really fails Kenyans, and the few judges who collude with these criminals really fail the people of Kenya when you expect them to rise to the occasion and make rulings that are proper, rulings that are in line with the law even and the constitution of this country. So that was a huge indictment, and I remember President Uhuru Kenyatta not being very amused about it, and he referenced it I think several times. So I think that was supposed to be a wake-up call for CJ Maraga and his team. And also during the same report, the CJ came out and said, you know what, sometimes it's very true, because the judiciary of the Republic of Kenya, the filing system is still very manual. I don't even know where in the world where they still have the filing system still in manual. Come on now, this is Kenya. This is Kenya, a place where we are the first people in the world to develop mobile money transfer from one mobile phone to the other, and you go and you withdraw your money. Come on now, we are good with technology. Our judiciary cannot still be operating on manual. Stop it. Our judiciary is supposed to have been digitalized by now. I don't even know why it's not, but that should have been should have already have happened. So the CJ came out and said, because of how our process is, and the filing is still very manual, and a lot of processes are still done very manual. So you realize, you go check for a case and the file is missing. Like, why are we still having missing files in the judiciary? So he came out and he was, I think, bold enough to admit of some of the shortcomings in the judicial, system. And so these are very serious matters, because some Kenyans' lives depend on these files. Depends on these files. Otherwise, an innocent family will lose a land somewhere because some cartel came and paid one of the judicial officials and destroyed the files or hid the files. So I don't know what happens to the files. So he came out and he admitted. So these are just some of the shortcomings. And so as much as I am happy now, the judiciary has gotten the money that they've been looking for. But now, can you return also the favor? Can the judiciary start working? Not even return the favor, forget that. Can the judiciary now start doing its job and just start fighting, especially corruption. There are cases that are of high profile. Kenyans are just sitting and waiting, and I'm just sitting and waiting and seeing how this Kimorer and Arol dam saga will end. I'm just sitting and waiting how this NHIF scandal and all these monies, will it be retrieved back? Will these cars be sold and the money brought back to the public? I'm just waiting and seeing what will be the end of the NYS money that was looted. And these are the major scandals and others really that has robbed this country of its monies, and the children of this country are suffering. And add to that list those people at the Nairobi county that I was watching. I think I shared this early in the morning. Those people who officials at the Nairobi county, I hope somebody takes them to court, that are responsible for issuing the bursaries to the poor children and the orphans, and there's just children from very unfortunate backgrounds. The needy ones and the bright ones are supposed to benefit from this fund so that they're able to complete their education. And then somebody somewhere just sits down, registers a fictitious school, and directs all these funds, and then they go buy a very wonderful house, they go buy an extra car, they take their children to very wonderful schools at the expense of those. I still can't even wrap my mind about it. How you sit down and you enjoy having a good cup of tea in that house that you build with such money, knowing that you've robbed somebody of a bright future. Like what in the name of humanity is that? It's a very sad situation. So I'm hoping that somebody's on that case, and when should they taken to court, which I hope they do, after investigations are complete, then I need action being taken. Please, the Kenyan judiciary now, if Parliament has given you the money that you wanted, in fact, over and above. Let me just read how much. Yes, you've been given over and above. So, Mr. Maraga and your team, let me see. Yes, so the National Treasury has allocated 13.65 billion to the judiciary for the 2020-2021 financial year, which the National Assembly raised by 4.3. Look, they've given you an extra 4.35 billion. So can you now go and work? Can you now build those extra courtrooms you wanted, Mr. Maraga? Can we now have our system digitalized? I cannot even sit here and think that the Kenyan judicial system is not digitalized. What are you talking about? Can we have that done now? Kenya is on the world map when it comes to advances we've made in terms of technology. And I want to sit here and talk about our judiciary that is not technology savvy, it does not have all its reports and systems up there. No, that is unacceptable. This is Kenya. That is supposed to have been done a long time ago. So now, CJ Maraga, with due respect, I think now you have the money with an extra 4.35 billion on top of it. Come on now, make things happen now, and Kenyans are looking forward. And there's no excuse now. You have the money, so let's just see now the judiciary get into the serious business of serving Kenyans. Stop giving these bail conditions that I've never heard anywhere in the world where you pay bail conditions in installments. I just saw this happening in Kenya some few months ago. A person cannot pay bail, so you pay it in installments. And this only happens to, I think the popular people, the richer people. A normal Kenyan cannot be allowed a bail condition in those conditions, cannot be allowed. You pay bail conditions as if you bought something on hire purchase. No, it does not happen in any jurisdiction outside. I've never heard of it. And so those bail conditions that only favor a few criminals, people who are accused, I think that should stop. And let's just let the law takes its course, and let the law be the law, regardless of who is facing it. Whether you have money, whether you're from the elite class or not, the law should just be the law. So another something that is making headlines in Kenya today is Wetangula warns against using BBI rallies to advance negativity. Now, Ford Kenya party leader Mr. Moses Wetangula has called upon a Building Bridges Initiative chairperson Yusuf Haji and his team to put roadblocks to any politician trying to introduce retrogressive politics during the rallies. The Bungoma senator was addressing mourners at Matulo Ward in Webuye West constituency yesterday during a burial. Wetangula said that the divisive politics propagated by a section of leaders in the BBI meetings across the country is an affront to disaster and conflict that may tear apart the nation. I think we talked about this very early in the morning, so I will not even go into the details of it. I think a lot of politicians have hijacked this process, and you know, they've used it for their own good and for advancing their interests for 2022. And when you hear a lot of them talk, they are clueless. They don't even know what's in the BBI. The 9 points, you ask them which one, number one, number two. No, they can't even name even two of them outside of unity and cohesion, which even they refuse to uphold when they're in these rallies. So I've said, and I think we've said here before, and I think I reiterate again, President Uhuru Kenyatta, these people have hijacked the whole process, and they turned it into a political, machine to benefit their own and to advance their own political, to score their own political goals. It's not good for the country. I hope that all the this time that we've been having this BBI whatever rallies and all, perhaps they have regrouped back, and perhaps they're back on track. They just stick to the 9-point agenda, and the people who will be coming there giving their opinions and their proposals about what perhaps their communities or their constituency that they represent, what their people want, must make sure that is in tandem with the constitution and is not outside of the frameworks of what is provided for, and whatever they alter must be in line with the constitution and must not be seen to be targeting or to be hateful or to be inciting Kenyans against other Kenyans. That is unacceptable. Should not be seen. What happened in Narok, I think, was a one-time thing that should not ever repeat itself again anywhere, and anybody who dares to do that again should be held full responsible. And of course, the Kenei death murder, the staff, the member, the police officer who was in charge of the security team of the Deputy President's office, who was murdered after that arms scandal. Now, 4 members of staff in Deputy President William Ruto's office are being questioned today. Question over the mysterious murder of Sergeant Kipyegon Kenei, but he was buried a few days ago. Detectives will also question 2 employees of a telco and 3 Department of Defense officials. All right, so this is something. I think this is the gift that keeps on giving, but in a very not very good way. So what will happen now? I'll take a short break. I think I'm almost done now, or thereabouts, and then perhaps we shall finish this, or we shall come back with the other show. But I'll take a short break. Please don't go too far. We shall be right back.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.